Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to the first official Honest About the Irish post-game show. And Notre Dame, as predicted and as expected, beat Duke 27-13. It wasn't a very pretty game, especially in that first half for Notre Dame, and they seemed to struggle with the run game in the first half, and their defense had trouble slowing down Duke. I really don't know how to feel about this game. I really don't know how to feel about Notre Dame and what this indication gave them. Usually you can tell on the first game of a season how the team's going to be, and a few things did concern me, and that was Notre Dame's slow start in the first half. We saw that a lot last year. That was a problem with some of their games last year, that they just started off sluggish, started off slow, and then took off in the second half or late second quarter. And you saw that yesterday. And this is another indication of Brian Kelly's teams playing down to their opponent's level, teams that they're supposed to beat by 3 scores or more. And we've seen this through the history of Brian Kelly's teams against teams like Tulsa, South Florida, Duke back in 2016 when they lost, when they were picked to win by 3 touchdowns in South Bend. And also Ball State a couple years ago when I believe Notre Dame was a 28-point favor in that game as well, 4 touchdowns. So that really concerned me, and I want to go over some stats. And look, I'm not a statistician. I'm not going to go over stats all the time, but there was some stats here that I wrote down yesterday when I watched this game, and they were really concerning. In the first half, Notre Dame was outgained by Duke by over 100 yards, and Notre Dame had only received 7 total yards on 10 plays and no first downs in the first quarter. And they went 0 for 3 on third downs. I mean, that's the sluggish start that I was talking about, referring to that Notre Dame has had the last couple years against any team with Brian Kelly. And that's something that they need to work on and playing down to their opponent's level. Now, of course, the fake punt in the second quarter kind of lit a spark under Notre Dame's ass. I mean, ever since then, they kind of took off with the game, and they looked fresh, and they looked a lot better. That was in the mid-second quarter. And their running game got a lot better because before it, they weren't doing anything on the running game. They weren't even doing anything offensively. I mean, Ian Book was overthrowing his balls. It looked like he was panicked. It looked like he needed to calm down a little bit, and that was concerning. Second half was a different tale. Notre Dame pretty much took over the game. Outrushed Duke. I believe Duke only had a total of 85 yards in the second half when they had 238 in the first half. So Notre Dame's defense definitely took over, but also Duke had a lot of mistakes as well, and they had a couple turnovers, and they had dumb penalties. And you felt like in this game during the first half that Duke could have been ahead by 2 scores. It felt like it was a 10-0 game in the first half, and Notre Dame just felt like they were behind, even though they weren't. They were only down at one point, and that was 3-0. And then in the second quarter, Notre Dame took over, scored 10 unanswered points, and then the third quarter and the fourth quarter, Notre Dame had outscored Duke 17-7 in the total of the first half. So, and that would final score would indicate 27-13. Now, Ian Book had a little bit better second half. Let's put it this way: Notre Dame had a much better second half than the first half. Two tales of 2 halves. 2 different stories. Ian Book went 19 for 31, 283 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Now, the story of the game was Notre Dame's rushing. Corinne Williams, 19 carries, 112 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and he looked very impressed in the second half, so he might be the star running back going further on through the season. Now, I'm a little agitated. I'm a little concerned about this. I hate these slow first halves that Notre Dame has had. You cannot have a half like that against Clemson in late November, even if it matters. I mean, Clemson's such a powerhouse. Will Notre Dame even be able to compete with them? Put it this way: if Notre Dame played the way they did yesterday in that first half against Clemson in November, they're going to get blown out. Because you cannot afford to play that way against a superior team like Clemson, and even North Carolina, which Notre Dame plays late November, very late November, the Friday after Thanksgiving, I believe, out in North Carolina. And North Carolina is no joke. Mac Brown is starting to build up some recruiting there and starting to make a statement there. That will be a tough game for them as well. So those are the two teams I'm circling, North Carolina and Clemson, Notre Dame, that they need to be up to par with those games. Because yesterday it was just not impressive at all. And look, I know this situation with COVID-19, how it's wiped out practices, how it's wiped out drills and stuff like that. And they weren't able to do the normal stuff that most teams do before the season starts. But I don't like making excuses, so I'm not. Notre Dame just needs to play better, and I am a little agitated. I mean, I knew they were going to win the game, but it didn't feel that way in the first half. They just, like I said, they felt behind 10-0, and it was just a weird feeling. And it's like you kept Duke around, but then in the second half, Notre Dame just pulled away, and that's what I expected after that fake punt. That's like I said, that lit the fire under Notre Dame's ass, but I did see some bright spots in Kyren Williams. He is a very productive running back. And Notre Dame's offensive line didn't look like they were predicted to be. There were a lot of experts out there saying that Notre Dame has the best offensive line. They're going to be able to run the ball and beat teams just with the run. Ian Book doesn't really need to pass all that much. He doesn't need to worry about the lack of power that he lost from last year because of their experienced, great offensive line. But it didn't seem that way again in the first half. The second half, yes, it took over. Maybe they wore down Duke's defense. But I don't know. I mean, I can't really tell how their season's going to go after this one game. Usually you can tell depending on if they would have lost in the same effort. Like I told you, they felt like they were down 10-0. Let's say Notre Dame did lose by 2 scores, and you would automatically know this isn't going to be a good season. It's going to be a rough ride. But, however, I'm left perplexed. I really don't know how the season's going to go. If they have these same issues against South Florida next weekend in South Bend, by the way, that channel's on USA because there is some sort of golf event on NBC. I believe it's the US Open. I can be mistaken, but that's the reason why the Notre Dame game is on 2:30 Eastern on USA. But if they have the same problems in the first half against South Florida and they keep South Florida in that game and Notre Dame's running game can't get going until the third and fourth quarter, then you're going to have an indication of what Notre Dame season's going to be. They need to start off on fire at kickoff and put South Florida away. Don't keep these teams around like they did Duke yesterday, because Duke was in that game up until the late third quarter, and I don't want to see that. When you're expected to beat these teams by 2 scores, you need to. And look, Notre Dame did win by 2 scores, but it didn't feel that way. It felt ugly, and Notre Dame needs to work on a lot of things. And like I said, my mood, all of you are probably thinking, well, why aren't you pissed off? Why aren't you mad? You call yourself Be Man is Mad. Because I expected this. I really did. I told you that Notre Dame was a 3-touchdown lead favor over Duke. I told you I wouldn't expect them to win by more than that. I said I wouldn't be surprised if they won by less than that. And I'm not surprised, because this is what Notre Dame is. Notre Dame is not Clemson. Notre Dame is not Alabama. Notre Dame is not Ohio State or LSU. They are Notre Dame, who are below them, and their talent is below them. And that's why they play down to these team levels like Duke and Ball State from a few years ago. Because that's what Notre Dame is. And that's why I have this show, because I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Notre Dame looked great. They blew out Duke. No, that game was not a blowout. Some fans might say, well, Notre Dame dominated them in the second half. Yeah, but you forgot about the first half, because it was an ugly game. And Duke is going to be a legitimate better team than last year. They're going to be able to score some points. And like I said, Duke had some missed opportunities in this game. And that is pretty much it with the game. And of course, the breaking story during the game was that Brian Kelly was signed to a 4-year extension. That decision was made back in December. And that's pretty interesting because, Brian Kelly has been, to me, an above mediocrity coach. He has brought them to a national championship game, got blown out, to the college football playoff game, got blown out. But you know what? I mean, who else would want to go to Notre Dame, and who else would you want them to coach? I guess Brian Kelly is the best that you could get right now at Notre Dame for the next 4 or 5 years. I mean, would you want Urban Meyer there, who's going to fake a sickness to quit and then go somewhere else in a few years? Like, I mean, I guess that's what we're stuck with, and that's what I've accepted. Brian Kelly. I mean, more mediocrity, above mediocrity, and every once in a while he will have a mediocre season. Maybe this year, who knows? But the way Notre Dame played yesterday in that first half, I mean, if they play like that in a whole game, they could have 2 or 3 losses this year, and very concerning. But yeah, just go with what we have. Except Brian Kelly, he's here the next 4 years. Depending on if Notre Dame has the next 4 years has awful seasons and they look terrible, then they could probably fire him before 2024. But we'll have to see. So that's pretty much it. My key points are Kyren Williams. He looked very impressive in the second half. He's probably going to be the starting running back now. Like I said, 19 carries, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Brian Kelly needs to coach up his team better and stop playing down to their team's level. That's the one big concern. So I had the bright spot there with Kyren Williams, and then the one concern with Brian Kelly's team playing down to their opponent's level. And what I would like to see is that Notre Dame to come out on fire next weekend against South Florida on USA there at 2:30 Eastern time, 1:30 my time. I live in the Central Time Zone, so they definitely need to come out here and just be explosive and look a lot better than last week. Run the ball, do whatever it is, get your offensive line going, because Ian Book was rushed a few times, was sacked a few times in that first half, so they definitely need to clean up on that. So that is pretty much it, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like the video or sound over and subscribe to my channel, those of you who are new. And we'll see how Notre Dame plays against South Florida next weekend. Hopefully it's much better. And everyone take care. And I hope you guys enjoy the NFL season. It starts off this weekend. The Bears are taking on the Lions. And I believe, like I said in my last voiceover, I don't know if I mentioned the Bears, but they are a 3-point underdog to the Lions. But I expect the Bears to win that game because Mitch Trubisky has a very good career against the Lions. I believe he has a quarterback rating of 106. So look that up. And I don't know why the Bears are predicted to be a 3-point underdog to that game, because the Lions are actually not expected to go anywhere this year except last place in the basement next to the Bears in the NFC Central. So, or I should say NFC North. I don't really watch the NFL all that much, but I was surprised to hear the line for the Bears-Lions game. But that's it, folks. And take care and enjoy the rest of your weekend.